This is Laura Vanderkam. I'm a mother of 5, an author, journalist, and speaker.
And this is Sarah Hart-Unger. I'm a mother of 3, a practicing physician, and blogger on the side. We are 2 working parents who love our careers and our families.
Welcome to Best of Both Worlds. Here we talk about how real women manage work, family, and time for fun. From figuring out childcare to mapping out long-term career goals, we want you to get the most out of life. Welcome to Best of Both Worlds. This is Laura. This is episode 235. We're going to be talking about moving and home renovation, something both of us are going through to various degrees. We are both moving. Sarah is doing slightly more limited home renovation, though she is doing some. So, Sarah, where are you in the house process right now?
So right now we own our new house. So that's exciting. We've closed. That part's all done. And it actually was fairly painless. So I'm very happy to report that worked out. But we have not moved because as we did a walkthrough, we were thinking about just painting. But then at the very last second, kind of looked at the floor and decided that it was time to do the floor. And then speaking with multiple people, no spoilers for the rest of this episode, but apparently it's much better to do your floor before you live in said house. So our rental is flexible and we can just give them a 30-day notice when we're ready to depart and end our contract. So right now we're in limbo. We're working on setting up the floor stuff, making our floor choices, and hopefully expediting that process so that we don't have to rent and own at the same time for too many months.
Yeah, no, floors are all kinds of fun. We went with golden oak stain, in case you were curious. Are you doing carpet anywhere or just the...
No carpet, but we are actually kind of like paralyzed with indecision about like wood versus luxury vinyl versus tile versus I don't even know. So we did kind of find a great store that's local that I think made the whole process a little bit less confusing. So I'm happy about that.
Well, that's cool. Yeah. I mean, having good people and you think will show up. It's all that good stuff. And you guys moved in, what was it, December 2018, right? That's when you last did all this?
December 2018. And we can talk about real estate later in the episode, but it's kind of hilarious how everything ended up working out. But it is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we are in the process of selling our home, which is all kinds of fun as well. But we don't need to go too much into that since we have not, in fact, closed yet. So hopefully that will happen eventually. So we're going to do this episode in sort of Q&A format, questions for both of us to answer, such as required or makes sense with this. So the first question, why are both of you moving, or why did you move? So Sarah, why did you guys decide to move?
Okay, we decided to move this time around for a purely financial calculation type decision. We were renting and it was very reasonable. I think I disclosed on a prior episode that the rent came out to like 7% of our take-home pay. And I was like, you know what? This is great. No commitment. We had also come off a very stressed out and frustrating selling process, and we weren't excited to go through that again. Spoiler alert, if we had rented out that home, let's just say that would have been a more advantageous financial position to be in right now. But the thing is, hindsight is very much 2020 and we had no idea. But it is rather hilarious to look at Zillow, which lists our Miami Beach home for like double what we sold it for 2 years ago. But whatever. It is what it is. Okay, so in terms of right now, there's actually a great calculator via New York Times where you can put in different variables about your home and how much you're renting it for, and it will kind of spit out an equivalent mortgage. Like if you can rent for less than XYZ, then it's worth renting. And if not, then it makes sense to probably buy. And that calculator was always kind of equivocal for us. So we felt like, okay, not a huge disadvantage to rent. We're comfortable doing it. Why not do it? Our rent went up hugely. In fact, South Florida is one of the places, rents have gone up across the country, but South Florida has been one of the hardest hit areas with that. I think it was like 49% in certain areas of I know, like crazy. And so it just the calculator no longer worked. And then we paired that with the fact that we no longer have uncertainty about whether we like the neighborhood. We know we like the neighborhood. We moved here in part for the schools, which we're not currently attending, but we really just like the people. We like the safety. I like that I can go run even when it's dark and feel completely fine about that. So, and the location works really, really well for both of our jobs. And my husband is at a place where he feels confident that he really likes his job. So I already knew I liked my job, but like his was fairly new. So it was more uncertainty. So putting all of those variables together, it just made sense. We were very, I guess, kind of like casual looking for houses. We went to a couple that like went on the market, but it was more like I just put something on the listserv like, hey, if anybody's selling, like let me know. And then the right thing just happened to come up and we went there and it fit. And so yeah, we're doing it. And we are very excited to get one extra room out of the deal. That I guess is another part of it that we felt motivated to have each kid have their own room.
Yeah. That was certainly one of our considerations. We wanted the kids to have their rooms, my husband and I to both have our own workspaces. And we had been semi looking, the whole Zillow stalking, whatever, since we knew Henry was coming. And the issue, of course, is that there has never been that much on the market that is big enough and that is in our elementary school catchment area. So if we considered ourselves very, very location limited, that obviously limited our options a lot. So we had also engaged a firm to come look at our house, our old house, and to see what it would take to add 2 more bedrooms, like to do an attic conversion to put in 2 bedrooms and a bathroom in the attic. And we certainly could have done that. Like we had plans drawn up for it and we had thought about going for it. Then COVID hit. We were trying to figure everything out. And in that, we wound up looking at this house that I'm currently recording from. The pictures, the real estate pictures did not look all that appealing to me. But then we elected to drive past it. And I have no idea like what they were thinking with the photos. Anyway, it looks so much better than, it was conveyed from there. So we went and toured it. It needed a ton of work. That's why it had been on the market for so long. Eventually, we got the same construction firm to come in and look at it with us and to let us know, what it would take to redo it, and wound up going for it. But yeah, it's been a long process. We closed in November of 2020, which is after looking at the house in June. It just took a long time for negotiations and everything. Closed in November, started construction officially in March, but had done so much planning prior to that. And then moved in the first week of January of 2022. So, a lot of time has gone by in the meantime, but, it's going to be fun, I hope. So the second question is, why renovate? Because everyone says it is so painful. Sarah, you are of the opinion that renovation is painful.
Oh, I just find it like so boring. I don't know. Like my eyes glaze over when I walk into a Lowe's. I have decision fatigue immediately upon looking at colors of anything. And my husband tends to be like somewhat opinionated, but also very slow to make said decisions. So I
Yes.
think that just like makes it even worse because I would probably just be like, whatever, this, that, and this, let's move on. But I can't totally do that because I don't think that would fly necessarily. Although we did choose paint colors, at least online, in about 30 minutes for the entire house.
That's good. That's good.
So I don't know. But we did decide that, the floors were kind of like outdated. And again, as I mentioned, it is just so much harder to do floors when you live in a home because there are parts you can't walk on. And we're planning to do like the kitchen and kind of like all the areas that would be high traffic in the house. We're not doing the bedrooms. The bedroom floors are actually excellent. They're wood. They're already done. But yeah, we just feel like our hand is being forced. And painting just seems like a logical step. But other than that, we're not doing any major renovations. We're lucky that the people who lived there prior did a big renovation where they actually enclosed a big porch and they turned it into what they call it, a game room, because they were really into ping pong, actually.
Okay.
We are not using it as a ping pong room. We are using this kind of long, somewhat narrow room as a workout area / office space for my husband and myself. We love what they did, but we didn't have to do it.
Yeah.
So it was great.
No, that's nice. I mean, obviously the ideal would be to have something that is move-in ready, that is absolutely as you want it in a good location. But in many cases, if there's anything that you may wind up paying quite a bit extra for that versus what it might cost to renovate, or you may not even get it. So in our case, the issue is that people do not build 7-bedroom homes. And so if you need home offices, if you need rooms for 5 children. Like you can't have a 5-bedroom house. Like you need 7 bedrooms. And again, people do not build those. So we were either looking at buying land, which there are very limited plots in this elementary district, right? Like we're in an like a very near in suburb. You can't just buy land. And what it would cost to build something new is quite high. So, I haven't totally run all the numbers. I mean, because we like this house too. But if you wanted enough bedrooms, you're going to have to renovate something that already exists, that was older, that was built when people did that sort of thing. And, we did like, honestly, everything to this house. We have a new roof. We have a new HVAC system. We have about 60% new windows, gutted the master suite in the kitchen, combined 4 like useless tiny rooms to make a playroom. So repainted the whole house, redid all the floors, like everything. There's all new toilets. I mean, it's just, because they were old and gross and not working, right? Like, I mean, so.
It sounds like one step from just a tear down.
Yeah, but well, you couldn't have torn the house down. I mean, that's because it's historically preserved. So given that that's not an option, you had to redo basically the entire inside. But, it's funny because, you see this on the other end with selling. A lot of people sort of do lack a bit of imagination when it comes to renovation. Like, I mean, there are people who walk in and be like, I don't like the color of the paint. And you're like, okay, I've got an idea. You could paint it. So
that's so funny. That is so funny. Yeah. The minor cosmetic stuff. I remember I would make those kind of comments and my husband rolled his eyes. He's like, okay, calm down.
Calm down. Like you can, in fact, paint this room. Wallpaper can be torn down.
That microwave's old.
The microwave's old, yes. Like another thing that could very easily be swapped out, or I don't like the oven. Like, guess what? For a rather small amount of money, you can purchase a new oven, although they're hard to get right now because of various supply chain issues. But, so I mean, yes, everyone says renovation is painful, but there are a couple of things you can do. I mean, one is just make sure you are adequately budgeting for it. Do not undertake any project where the estimated expenses you are getting are close to the maximum of what you can afford, because it is going to always cost more. And I have no idea why construction works this way. Like, why is this an industry where that is the accepted, like, way that it works? But it does. I mean, I can tell you it does. We are not far off what our initial estimates were, but it's still more, right? Like, there's just stuff that comes up and it is going to take more time. Again, not sure why construction is allowed to work this way. Like, I don't get to just say, hey, my book is running a couple months later than expected and think everyone's going to be A-okay with that. But whatever, construction does work that way. The crash jobs people see on HGTV, like there are things that have been like taped in place for the reveal. It doesn't go that quickly. Like even with people working around the clock that they do on some of those. And
I've read some really interesting like exposés on people who had those kind of HGTV flash renovations and like they didn't do key things so that it looked really good for 5 minutes, but like they didn't seal the floors or they didn't do this or that. It's like, well, okay.
Yeah, so probably
quality takes a little time.
Yeah. So whatever. I mean, as long as you understand that going in, then you can just be annoyed by certain things as opposed to like horribly anxious when it costs more than you thought you do. But All right, let's take a quick break and then we will be back on more on moving and renovation. Well, we are back talking moving and renovation. The next question, what can I do to keep it from being a complete nightmare? Is this what you're worried about with doing more extensive renovations? Like,
I would be. I don't have the bandwidth. Like, I don't want to have to call this person because this person broke this person. And, I've heard like terrible stories about contractors who quit in the middle of the job and things like that. And it's very hard to like, once someone started something, if they mess it up, you're sort of stuck in a way.
Yeah.
And somebody else might not want to take that on, or they might, but then they might be like, well, now I have to charge double what they even start. I don't know. My brain goes to a lot of worst case scenario.
Yeah. So, I mean, the one thing I can say is when you have, a big job, like hiring a general contractor is almost always going to be a wise idea because, yeah, you don't want to be calling all the subcontractors and figuring out what goes first. Like, do I do the painting first or the floors first? I mean, there's not actually like there's a right answer, but you probably aren't going to know it, because you haven't done this before. And if you do this well, like, I mean, so they will warranty work as well. So we had, when I did the kitchen in my old house back in 2018, we repainted the cupboards, and everyone had thought it would be a fairly simple job. And then for whatever reason, it was not. It had to be redone twice, but we never had to pay an extra cent for it because the price they had given us was the price it was going to be. And then, the various subcontractors had to like redo it. When they did it wrong that time, they brought somebody in again to like, do it again. And so that's what you're looking for. If and you can read this in reviews on, I would definitely do your research when you're hiring a general contractor. Like, talk to anyone who has done a home renovation. Like, if they liked their contractor, that is a great sign. Like, you should be excited about that. Because they'll have relationships with all the subcontractors, the electricians, plumbers, painters, roofers, HVAC, carpenters, whatever it is you're doing, and they know what order it should go in. Yeah, there are definitely horror stories out there of all this. But, so one thing you could do again is if you get bids from multiple places, keep in mind, if somebody bids lower, but they have worse reviews, like, don't actually go with that person because it's a fake number. Like, that's not what it's actually going to cost. And so I would say you would prioritize good reviews, somebody having been in business for decades, maybe have been independently audited, various things. Like, any of that is going to be a far better sign than the actual price. This is somewhere where I'd say you don't necessarily want to go with the lowest bid. Like, go with something that seems reasonable, but is with somebody who's reputable. Even so, like, you're going to make thousands of decisions. You just have to prepare yourself for it. And decisions on things you probably didn't care about before, like the trim on the carpet on the stair runners and the shape of your drawer pulls. So yeah, it helps to be a satisficer where, good enough is good enough, because most things can in fact be changed if you hate it. Like, we repainted the bedroom, like the master bedroom, because I didn't like the color. So we had to repaint it. We did. It's fine. The first coat had only gone on and they could just get the color in the second coat for a different color. It was all good. And, as what Sarah was saying, like, if you are doing group decisions, it might help to, as we discussed with Eve Rodsky a few weeks ago, have complete ownership of certain areas. Like, one party might be completely responsible for, say, HVAC decisions, and another party could be completely responsible for hardware and paint colors or something like that. Where you wind up with problems is if one person is doing a lot of the legwork to make decisions and then the other person somehow winds up with veto power. I mean, that just is like, it's going to make for an infuriating situation, because that's basically implying that the person doing the legwork works for the person who's making the veto decisions. And that's not a romantic relationship. That's just somebody's power trip. So I would get out of that situation if you're in it. Like, assign, either refuse to do it or like hire somebody to make all the decisions who can then report to that guy or girl or whoever it is who's.
I don't think that's our problem at all. I think I would gladly just not make any decisions. I just don't want like 6 months to go by where we're paying to live in two places.
Yeah, exactly. Assign deadlines. Like, listen, we need to get out. That's why we moved in with the stuff still here. We're like, we got to get out. Eventually. Also, because when you're in a place, you see stuff that also then you need to do that you wouldn't have known about before and figure stuff out. So anyway. All right. Any practical tips?
Wait, we forgot the satisficer part.
Well, just, if you good enough is good enough, right? Like, if it really helps to get in your head that it doesn't have to be perfect. Most things can be changed. It might be expensive. It might be a hassle, but they can in fact be changed. So if you have that in mind, then it turns down the pressure at least a little bit. It's hard to bat 1,000. Like, again, if you're making 100 decisions, like, the odds that all of those are exactly right are just minimal.
I like it. Don't try for perfection. But you're right. Having that open-mindedness of like, if I don't like that in 5 years, 10 years, whatever, that is something that could theoretically be changed. Or maybe by then you just won't care.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of how I feel about my shower tile at the moment. I don't like what I chose, but whatever. It's going to grow on me and it's fine. So it's a shower. I mean, there's some element of this like, wow, I built this bathroom from scratch. I could have chosen any tile in the world and I chose this, which I don't like. Like, what was I thinking? I don't know. I think I felt like I had to make a decision.
I'm going to see this tile now.
So maybe I'll put a picture up somewhere. Apparently it's really nice tile. I don't know. And it was like doubled in price since I chose it. So at least I got a good deal on it. But
wow. And you could probably sell it on
sell it
eBay
off my
something.
bathroom. Like, come chip it off. Put something that's just plain white there instead. All right. So Sarah, you have done this. Any tips for moving locally? Like, what are you guys doing that's going to...
Yeah, I'm like trying to remember. I mean, last time we didn't do any of the packing. We completely outsourced that. We did move a few things on our own. We could do a lot more of that this time because, I mean, last time our local move was like, a 35-minute drive, and this time it's 1 mile. So I think we'll probably do some of that ourselves. I'm intrigued by like the unpacking service. I want to know how much that costs, although it's probably a bad idea because then they've decided where to put everything. And like, you're probably going to have different opinions where you want things. And then you don't want to have to move things like you know what I mean? Like, oh, they chose that closet to do that. I don't know. So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, and also if you are getting different furniture, it like wouldn't even work because how would they know what to, and we didn't even have all our furniture delivered. I mean, we still are getting stuff because we got rid of a fair amount of IKEA type particle board furniture that we had collected over the years. That was just, it's recommended that you don't move it.
We have moved some of our IKEA furniture multiple times and it has stood the test.
Well, apparently you guys are good at it then, your construction.
I gotta say, like, yeah, Josh and I are waiting for the part in life when we're too like fancy for IKEA. We like haven't gotten there. Sometimes we go West Elm, and we're like, ooh, we're probably about 30 to 40% West Elm and the rest. I think it's because of the age of our kids. Like, they still wreck everything. So why would I invest in like super nice stuff when I have
totally agree.
a 4-year-old who likes to adorn everything and scrape things and like, yeah.
Well, I was intrigued by the unpacking as well, given how much time I've been unpacking. But I don't know. I think we did want to like go through it and choose places ourselves, and we're making progress. I mean, we say try to throw out or donate as much as possible. Like create a giant junk pile somewhere. I don't know, your garage. Just label whatever furniture that is not going to make it that you're going to donate or sell. Which again, you can't donate stuff that can't be sold. I guess just a public service announcement here. If you are planning on donating something to a charity, they are not like giving people who don't have furniture. Like what they do is they sell the furniture and then they give the money to people to use as they, do or to support their programs or something. So if they can't sell it, they don't want it. So if it's like, I mean, you just can't donate garbage, basically, is our public service announcement here. So with that in mind, you might want to create a junk pile of stuff or recycling pile and then call a junk hauling service that can then determine if it is junk, if it can be recycled, if they have a program for that. So, that's the way to go with that. We did hire a packing crew to box up our stuff. It is expensive. Unless you're going to do this over a long period of time, like driving stuff to your new house, it's just going to be more work than you can do. And also I'd say give some compassion to yourself when you are then unpacking stuff that is in essence garbage, because it is impossible to have gone through all of it beforehand. And like, you just don't see stuff necessarily. And like, unless you did just Marie Kondo your entire house, you're going to wind up with things like, oh, I didn't know I had this many glass vases. Like, you don't think to just like throw out or recycle glass vases necessarily. And so you probably have them somewhere in a curio cabinet, and then you wind up unpacking all of them. You're like, I just don't need this many vases. Like, so it just happens. It happens.
The junk hauling service, I think, is underrated.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people will, keep stuff around for ages thinking that they're going to like haul it off themselves or figure out what's recyclable and what's not. And there are actually great services that will like sort that all out for you and take it all away. And it's like, for them, it's so easy. And for you, it's so much mental anguish because that's like literally what they do.
It's a fairly competitive industry, actually, because you don't need a huge amount of capital or whatever to get into it. Like, you need to hire a few guys and have a few trucks. So Probably there are a fair number of local companies. There's also like national franchises, Junk Dogs or J Dogs or whatever it is. There's one, I don't know if they're still in business. It was called like College Hunks Hauling Junk. That was around. There's just a lot of them. So definitely avail yourself of this possibility when you're doing it. I would also ask your movers, like when you're getting bids on this, what items will be more trouble or expensive to pack and move than necessary. So often things like anything that is framed, they are going to wind up putting in a special framing box because they're not allowed to break things. So they don't know if it's like, they have to treat everything as valuable. And so if you framed some $20 poster you got at a museum in college, like just bring that over yourself. Like it is not worth a $20 box and a frame to bring that over. So, do that. Probably lamps, like table lamps are another one that they're going to put so much packing around it because again, they are not allowed to break things. So if it's like a $10 thrift store table lamp that you got, just bring that over yourself because it's going to make you mad that you spent like $30 on the special box to get it over to your new house. Often live plants, they can't do as well. So that's one that you're probably going to need to do. And then pull out anything you think you're going to need for the first, I would say 2 to 3 weeks. I was thinking, people told me, oh, your first few days, pull out what you'll need for the first few days. Like that, like massively underestimated how long it was going to take us to get through our stuff. I didn't find most of my pots and pans for 3 weeks. And so, because it just happened to be in the bottom box, like it was the last box we got to in the kitchen for whatever reason. And so we were working with one saucepan, one frying pan, and one like bacon cooking pan that for whatever reason like made it out. And so that's what we had to cook with for 3 weeks. So I would recommend being a little bit more judicious and thinking, what do I use in a 2-week period? And that stuff. I mean, we're talking towels, laundry detergent, any of that sort of thing. Make sure you have.
Did you kick your kids out or send them somewhere so you could unpack? Because I think I really want to do that.
No. I mean, especially if your kids are like old enough that they can just watch TV, I'm not sure that it's really going to be all that necessary. You know what I'm saying? Like, or
I have to put the TV up.
We'll do that first. Like we put up the computer and television like absolutely first, right? Like that's, and plus they have their devices, right? So, I mean, I don't know. I feel like modern children who are over about age 6, like have a built-in entertainment, like in the form of a device, if you need to avail yourselves of that. Obviously, you can't have them underfoot while movers are actually moving things in and out. So, but our movers, again, with a local move, they work basically like an 8 to 4 day for packing. So the children were in school during that time. And then when the moving crew was there, they were, again, the 8 to 4 time, they were in school. And so then that just left a couple hours in the evening when things sort of took a longer time, one of the days to finish up. So we just kind of sent them off to one corner of the house, like kept them over there and out of range.
I think mine would be all up in the boxes wanting to unpack. I don't know. I think I'm going to send them away somehow, like to our nannies or to a friend's sleep. Not for like a long time, but like, hey, what a good night to sleep over your friend's house.
Yeah, I mean, sure. If I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I'm just saying like if it doesn't work out, like it wouldn't be the end of the world. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. You're totally right. Yeah. And you're right. Like I always have it in my mind that I'm going to unpack everything instantly.
Like you won't.
It's just not possible.
I just don't think it's reasonable to expect that of yourself. I mean, because it's not like you're going to stop working and stop having 3 children. Like they're all still going to be there. Like we've tried to kind of pace ourselves on this, that it was so overwhelming at first. But if you commit to doing, like if both adults in the household, let's say, do 2 boxes a day, well, 4 a day, 28 a week, like, I don't know, you have 100 boxes, that's 4 weeks, like you're done. And if the children are doing anything, then that's additional. You just have to keep going. Like you don't necessarily feel on Tuesday night like unpacking 2 boxes, but like you probably should do at least 1 and, know that you'll do 3 on the weekend or whatever, but just to maintain that pace so it's keeps moving forward.
No, that makes sense. Ugh, I want to be done. It's a while off.
I mean, we're not done, but it's not the end of the world. I mean, it's a process. It's like, it's not going to be perfect, but eventually it will be done. And, I say as somebody who just spent hours yesterday waiting for the furniture to get delivered that wasn't delivered. It just, it's fine.
One day at a
One
time.
day at a
And at
time.
least we don't. Oh, I know what I wanted to mention related to moving, which is moving schools. Because you didn't do it
No.
this time, but I did do it last time. And I guess I would share that we did move in the middle of the school year. It was not the worst thing. We moved like over winter break. So it was like, okay, you left for the holiday and then you started at a new school. I think it was mildly stressful for Annabelle, but she got over it pretty quickly. She was going in first grade from one really good public school to another one. I have one regret, which is that Cameron went from like a Reggio style preschool to like a much more regimented one. And that is like a contrast. So if I could have done it all over again, I would have looked for a school with more similar vibes because I feel like all of a sudden he was in trouble for things that were like charming and cute at the first school. And that's like a rude awakening. So, I mean, he survived, but if you're going to switch your kids in the middle of a year, you might want to at least think about like, does the school have similar disciplinary processes and philosophies, if possible? Because I could have like, but I didn't know the local landscape as well. Like now I'm like, oh, it would have been obvious. I could have sent him here or here. And I didn't know.
Well, you can't get everything right. I mean, you just can't make every decision perfectly. It's you have to sort of give yourself some compassion, understanding for this. There's so many decisions to be made and they won't all be perfect. Which leads us to our question of reestablishing or improving upon routines in a new place. Because when you think about many of your routines turn out to be somewhat place-based. I mean, they're based on your space and they will change when you move. And especially when you have a big family, that can be very disruptive, and probably more so for many of our listeners who are accustomed to building very good routines. I mean, if we had listeners whose lives were chaotic all the time, it'd be like, whatever, it's now chaotic in a new place. Like, so what? But that is probably not our listeners. Our listeners have thought through every detail of their day to optimize, and now they have to change it. So, I mean, there's some things you just can't really know. We had become accustomed to our local school buses picking up our kids at our driveway. We now know that that does not happen universally. And our buses don't come up our street, don't come up our hill. I don't know if it's hard to turn around. I'd be happy to have them turn around in my driveway, but whatever. I don't know if there's a process you could petition for that. The key thing here is they pick them up at the bottom of the hill. It's a long way down. You know, they could walk through our yard, but our neighbors have put like hedges right at the edge, so they'd be in the road there. It's a busy road where the intersection crosses. Like, we tried it for one day and it was like, no. So the older boys get driven to school, which is, it's very quick for both of them. And because we didn't want them waiting in the dark at the bottom of the hill in this busy road, but they can take the bus home. They take the bus home, and because we trust them to get off and, you know, make their way up the hill, that they can do that.
Wait, are they at the same school now?
No,
I'm like losing track.
One's in middle school, one's in high school.
Okay.
The elementary school age kids, just, because our nanny went to wait for them like the first day. She said the bus driver was like laying on his horn trying to get people to stop because they have to come around a curve. And so, you know, he didn't open the door until traffic was stopped both directions, like, so till somebody came along and had stopped, you know, so that they would stop the rest of the traffic. But I was just like, oh my, like, no, like, and I don't want her waiting there, like, you know, on a busy corner. So anyway, she now drives them and picks them up. Driving is easy. Picking up is a bit of a pain because it's the car line, which apparently we have a very intense car line. Usually when I would pick them up, I would do what we call student pickup, which is you park and you go right to the door and they come out and it's very quick. But since she often has the toddler with her at pickup time, because we can't guarantee we'll be here, you know, be able to take him for, you know, the 30, 40 minutes it would be to go, that she does the car line, and it's a long car line.
That was our local elementary. Yep. Intense car line. I don't miss it at all.
So, you know, we've had to change our routines based on that. But, you know, like if I'm here, you know, like, and he's asleep, for instance, I don't usually, she doesn't have to wake him up to take him, you know, I'll let him nap or whatever. But yeah, we don't want to be switching back and forth daily from one way to another. And so we just said, we'll do the pickup. But yeah, it's, you know, it is what it is.
The routine for us that I think is going to change that I'm kind of looking forward to is that they're going to be all going to bed in their own rooms.
Ooh.
So I think that will, listen, I'm not going to lie on all of their floors. Like it's
You
not going to
can't.
happen. So either we'll figure out some sort of rotation or maybe it'll just be like a natural end to that process. And then the other thing is that there are a lot more kids in the very immediate area, some of which my kids already know. So I'm hoping that lends itself to more like around the block kind of playing. One of the girls is Annabelle's age and takes tennis lessons in our complex where she rides her own bike to the lesson. And I'm like, oh my God, Annabelle could transport herself to an activity. Like, how cool is that? So I'm excited for those kinds of routines.
Oh, that's going to be nice. And yeah, there's obviously going to be like the bus thing is kind of a, unfortunate thing that was not anticipated. But, there's other routines that have gotten better. I mean, among other things, like the baby, we have not had middle of the night wake ups. And it's just that I think we're slightly further from him. And now that he has his own room, and so maybe he wakes up, but we don't hear it. And he's not looking traumatized in the morning. So given that he's over 2 years old, we're just going to like run with it. And, there's some nice things, like my husband and I now have a fireplace in our room. We convert, it was because it's such an old house, like it was at one point like how they heated the room, but we converted it to a gas fireplace. So we turn it on with a remote control, and it's kind of nice because you can just sit there and have a little, cuddle on the couch and with the fire. And it's really, we didn't have that before. So it's there's some nice new routines. So that's good. Last question I want to ask is tips for selling while you are still living in your house. So, Sarah, you guys attempted and then stopped, right? Or like you didn't even...
I almost am like, my tip is if the market is bad, just give up and rent. But I mean, I wasn't going to listen to that advice 2 years ago. So who knows? I mean, right now it's such a seller's market. Yeah. So I don't have any selling tips because I haven't sold in the current climate, which I'm sure is very different than my experience.
Yeah, it was hard to know. I mean, we had a reasonable number of people come through, and we had the requirement that we had to have 24 hours notice just because you can't. I mean, because we had to get out of the house every time. And so it's like, you can't just like leave at 2 p.m., and find another place to go. I mean, sometimes we did. My husband and I would go work in the garage over here. But it was, it was hard to get everyone out. What we did is we had gotten a lot of stuff out of closets and again, put it in the garage over here. So decluttered down to a spot where there was just less stuff in it. And then figured that we were approximately an hour from having the house be presentable. Now, of course, we did have to do that hour like every time because, the kids would put toys out, so we'd have to pick up the base and we'd go through like who put toothpaste all over their cabinet, their countertop or over the mirror. Like, how do you even get toothpaste on the mirror? I don't get it, And then a house full of little boys using bathrooms, always need to check that everything has gone where it should. And, cleaning up the kitchen, decluttering, stuff like that. But yeah, it would take an hour and then we'd have to get out of the house. And, it was kind of painful. Like, there's no other way to describe this, but on some level, it's just a money thing. Like, if you can convince yourself that it is actually a pretty good payment back on your time for doing this, because most likely when you're negotiating for a house, there's often like at the end, it's small amounts compared to the size of the house purchase. But like objectively, it's not small amounts of money. Like, even if you're talking about $1,000 or $2,000, you wouldn't just, go blow $2,000 in a store on a random day. Like, it actually is a lot of money, even if it's like 2,000 is, a small percentage of what your house price is. So like, if you could convince yourself of that, it kind of helps. Like, oh yeah, we're all going to spend an hour cleaning up. But on the other hand, this is probably, if it gets it sold, like again, a month faster than it would have, if it gets it sold for even $1,000 or $2,000 more than it would have, like the return on that hour is fairly good. So I don't know. That's just mentally what I tried to do.
No, that's good. That's good. Helps you get through it and makes it seem worth it rather than painful waste of time.
Exactly. All right. Well, let's go to our question and answer for this. So Sarah, I'll put this to you first. This listener is reaching out regarding the cry it out method for babies. So her partner and her are from different cultures and are having trouble agreeing on what is the right thing to do with their baby. So in the US, so this listener is not from the US originally, and her partner is. They said she keeps hearing the advice to let the baby cry it out. It's awful for 2 weeks, and then he will never cry at night again. However, in her culture, they absolutely do not leave a baby crying for any length of time. Also, as a first time mom, she doesn't think she can do it without listening to the crying without rushing to help. She already has some anxiety. So when the baby cries, she imagines that the absolute worst thing is happening. So they have survived to 9 months. The child, most of the time, sleeps through the night at this point, but they would like to have other children eventually. So she's wondering if there is a way not to have the first 9 months be up all the time. And, if it's possible that a strict routine would help with avoiding some of that sleep deprivation. So what do you think, Sarah?
I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. I do think from what I've read, there isn't really strong evidence that cry it out like ruins your child or anything. So I don't think there's necessarily harm in trying it. It's more the question of whether it makes you super comfortable. And as Laura will get to, how effective it is, because that can depend on the kid. For us, we did kind of a modified version where I would try some cry it out when we first put them down if they were still awake to help them learn how to, go to sleep when all the bedtime cues were there. But I was never one of those I'm going to have my baby sleep 12 hours kind of a person, because I was pumping and I knew that my baby might be hungry. And so I'd rather feed them overnight than not. I mean, it just didn't make logical sense to me if they were getting their nutrition from me and I knew the pump wasn't necessarily as great at extracting. It didn't seem fair to deprive them. And I also was lucky to have babies where when I fed them overnight, there was no soothing necessary. It was you eat, I plunk you back down and I go back to sleep. So there was no training needed. At some point when I weaned my kids, depending on the age, or when I just made a decision that they did not need to eat overnight anymore, Genevieve nursed until 20 months. But I think at 12 or 13 months, I was you do not need to eat in the middle of the night. You're eating meals, you're fine. We did do a brief cry it out, and I guess it worked because I don't feel I have a lot of bad memories from it. But I don't know. I could see it being very difficult when the kids are really little and they're still needing to eat anyway. So
yeah, I mean, and I think that's one of the things to think about here. There is very different approaches of this in different cultures. And I read a book. It was a anthropological book a couple of years ago that pointing out that it's true. In some places, they were shown videos of American mothers with their kids crying on a changing table, while they're being changed. And people were horrified, that you don't pick up a baby as soon as they're crying. It's just everyone's different, right? Different places are different. And yet kids are fine everywhere, right? Most children are fine anywhere, no matter what you grow up with. So, there's some places where no one would ever do cry it out. There's some places where everyone does cry it out. And it's the kids are fine regardless. So you can take with that what you will. If you think cry it out's going to be hard for you, then don't do it. If you're not going to be able to do it, then don't tell yourself you will. But if you think you want to try it, again, don't think you're hurting your baby. Your baby's probably going to be fine. So I guess it's really just, totally up to you. And there is not one right way to do it. The question is it effective? For some kids, it might be. And for other kids, it's not. So there you go. There are some children that, as you said, they cry for people well, I just let them cry for 20 minutes and then I never had to do anything ever again. It's well, you got a good sleeper. Just be happy about that. And maybe they needed a little bit of figuring out how to fuss a little and put themselves to sleep. And that's great. You should enjoy that. And that doesn't mean, your child is, I would put this, it doesn't mean you're a great parent. You probably are. But that in and of itself does not mean that you are a better parent than somebody whose child does not do that, because some kids don't do that. And I know this from 5 children. Some of my kids were better about going to sleep than others. Some you could, fuss for 10 minutes and mostly they'd figure it out. Others will fuss for hours and still never figure it out. And it would be night after night after night. And so then you have to figure out other ways. And, it does get better over time. As you noted, your 9-month-old is sleeping. And so, I guess I could say do what you want, and just you might experiment as well, because it might work and it might not work too. Like you don't have to commit yourself to one thing or the other. All right, so let's quick do a love of the week. What's rocking your world this week, Sarah?
I will say I have been enjoying reading a lot of different book lists for the new year. I think I started with Modern Mrs. Darcy, but then she invited like everybody else to post where they put their 2022 reading list. And I just had fun perusing all these different lists that people made, because it's just, I got lots of my own ideas from it. So yeah, I guess reading other people's reading lists is my love of the week.
Excellent. So my idea of my love of the week is having one drawer that is officially drawer where things don't have another home. So as a category, when you're trying to put things away, like you can be stymied for a long time with like a pile of stuff that you just don't know where to put it, right? Like it doesn't fit any of the obvious other categories of, you've put different drawers or different closets or different places where things go. And so this is a drawer of stuff that does not have another home. And, some people have like a junk drawer or whatever, but I sort of think of as junk drawers where you put specific things like, rubber bands and pencils and whatever. This is more random. And we now have one in the kitchen that has a lot of random stuff in it. But the kitchen counter is finally mostly cleared off. And it was never going to be if I was like trying to come up with categories that were, mutually exclusive and comprehensively exhaustive for the organizing. So that is what we do, an other.
Can you name a couple items that are in this drawer?
So there is a bin with some crayons in it. There is a Tyrannosaurus Rex head that is a cup. There is a pool toy. There is a few like decorative things children have made, but that they, I haven't quite gotten around to doing something with yet. There's, it's really stuff like that.
I like it. It's the miscellaneous.
Miscellaneous. All right. Well, this has been Best of Both Worlds. We have been talking moving and home renovation. We will be back next week with more on making work and life fit together.
Thanks for listening. You can find me, Sarah, at theshoebox.com or at @the_shoebox on Instagram.
And you can find me, Laura, at lauravanderkam.com. This has been the Best of Both Worlds podcast. Please join us next time for more on making work and life work together.